You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christi and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast, where we are talking about movies about mothers and specifically parenting in general.
In general, parenting in specific.
We love this movie. We're going to talk about Parenthood today. It came out in 1989. Director Ron Howard, stars Steve Martin, Mary Steenburgen, Rick Moranis, Diane Weiss, Jason Robards, a young Keanu Reeves, a very young Joaquin Phoenix, and
Still known as Leaf.
Yes, known as Leaf at the time, and Martha Plimpton.
Daughter of George Plimpton of Paper Lion fame. Those of you who've been treated to my treatise on Paper Lion, it's a good book.
You've brought that one up a lot. You like that one.
I do.
The synopsis for this film is the Buckmans are a Midwestern family all dealing with their lives, estranged relatives, raising children, pressures of the job, and learning to be a good parent and spouse. And the tagline is, it could happen to you. So Mike, why don't you kick it off with your pickup line?
We missed 4 innings. So there's actually some sounds in the background, but I consider that the first line of dialogue from one of our titular characters. And I do think it kind of works because one of the underlying themes in this film is that there's things missed by being parents.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of a really poignant scene to kick us off right off the bat with a young Gil at the ball field.
It's great storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I have to say, story credit goes to Ron Howard, Babaloo, Mandel, and Lowell, Ganz, the latter two, who got the screenwriting credit, and they're longtime Hollywood screenwriters, really good work. But that shows us both, we start with that nostalgia, right? And that's going to come back in with the car that his dad has in that theme. And then, well, I'm an amalgam, right? And it shows that the title character is neurotic. He's got some mental issues going on. And so it lets the viewer know immediately what we're getting in for.
Yeah. And that scene is followed with a scene that I think most parents can relate with is trying to wrangle, was it 3 kids?
3 kids to a minivan in a parking lot after a baseball game.
Carrying all of the gear that you carry, you know, the diaper bags.
Crap. Yeah.
The souvenirs, you know, just you're exhausted.
Oh, it is
just
perfect.
waded through a sea of people. Yeah. It's a great scene and it runs over the credit scene. And so a song by Randy Newman, who did the music for the soundtrack.
Right. Very distinctive, Randy Newman.
It just sets the tone for what the rest of the film is going to be. All of the trials and tribulations of parenthood.
My note is that the scene of them going to the car tells you everything you need to know about parenthood.
Yeah. Why would anybody have kids after watching that scene?
I don't know. They obviously close their eyes.
Because that is like hell trying to do all that stuff.
Yeah, and that was a few years ago for me, but I vividly was taken back to that experience by watching that. I love the gag where the daughter grabs onto his lower leg and he's walking around saying, "Oh, where are you?" Because that comes back later in the film when she tries the same thing again at a much worse possible time, right? And as a parent, I remember having my son cling to my leg like that, and it was funny for some silly reason. Don't know why. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but I could see if you had gone through some sort of job-related incident, you probably wouldn't want to do that.
Right. Yeah, it took me back to all those days. We never went to a ball game, but, you know, walking with the dinosaurs or the odd Toy Story on Ice.
Story on Ice, yeah.
All of the wrangling of small children.
They're kind of like ocelots, I think. They're bigger than a house cat, and they're dangerous.
That's a really good description.
Thank you. Maybe a bumper sticker or a T-shirt or something.
Oh, and a young Bryce Dallas Howard is seen later in the film during the school play. She's seen there. So this is a packed cast. And Helen Shaw, this was her final film just before her death at the age of 100. She plays Grandma.
I think her acting in this film proves that there are no small parts. She doesn't have very many lines of dialogue, but boy, what she's got, especially the last line of dialogue she has, that bit, really impactful.
Yes. For all you Backstreet Boy fans, here's a little bit of early trivia here, early in the podcast. A Howie Doro obviously I wasn't a Backstreet fan because I don't know how to say it, but Howie from the Backstreet Boys is seen in the classroom, in the front row of the classroom when Nathan comes in to sing the Carpenters song Close to You to Susan.
Was he overshadowed by Justin Timberlake next to him?
Yeah, right next to him. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a fun film just because of that cast.
Oh, and it's amazing how they have some pretty big hitters in there and still manage for everyone to get their own role, their own time.
Their story.
Good writing.
How would you describe the writing? Like, does this have a B arc and a C arc?
Yeah, I think we could say there probably is. There's the Rick Moranis, Harley Kozak kind of marital issues there. There's his, I was going to say Steve Martin with his job, Diane Wiest with her children.
Steve Martin with his dad.
With his dad, then his dad with Tom Hulse, right?
I mean, this one has so many.
Right, and they are weaved together. And one of the things I think is masterful about this film, although it is a little bit longer at 2 hours, so they do take some runway for this, they develop these various things. And so there's a point in the film early on where you see the character of Larry, played by Tom Hulse, manipulating his father, Jason Robard, or at least you think.
Yeah.
And then later in the film, it comes back that his dad is aware of what's been going on all along. And I think when I saw this film before I had children, that didn't land as much as after, because I could see as a parent, there are things that you pretend you don't know.
Right.
Because you love your kids and you want them to succeed and get the things that they want. And so watching Jason Robard's arc as he plays that character of that father, fantastic stuff. But that in itself is its own, right? In some sense, you easily make a short film out of that, but all these arcs do feel big. They feel like there's a lot going on. So that's where I come down to, obviously, some direction, but also writing. Great writing if you're able to pack that much, to distill so much story down into what really takes place over a relatively short number of days.
I totally agree. In my notes, the writing dominated my notes because I felt like this movie did so well the show don't tell. Like when Tom Hulse's character Larry shows up, you see on not only Jason Robard's face how it lights up and he can't wait to see his son, but then you see shared glances between Steve and Diane Wiest's character and Rick Moranis' wife, who's their sister, that they're not thrilled that Larry has showed up. Or here we go, the worship of Larry from dad, but yet we can't get him to make a second glance and we're all productive people.
Great filmmaking, credit to the writing, direction, and cinematography when that scene, because Jason Robards is having this reaction, and the actor who plays his wife, and I'm sorry, I forget her name, has the exact opposite facial reaction.
Yes.
And the way it's framed and the way the actors delivered it, it tells us right there in that 1 second, oh, there's a lot going on. And purely writing, but I love this line, and I didn't catch it the first couple times I saw the film. At one point at the tail end of when Larry shows up, Gil says to him, "Oh, you stopped wearing your turban."
And that's
brilliant. It says that he's a nutbag that for a while was wearing a turban, and he was into this thing like, I'm now into turban wearing, and it's just a perfect brother saying to another brother, "Oh, so you stopped wearing your turban."
Okay.
And it was delivered quietly and just one of those
subtle,
passing snide comments like
that brothers share.
That brother would do. You walk by and you give him just a little poke verbally.
Yeah, you're right. You know, you mentioned Jason Robard's wife, and I'm going to feel bad if I look her up, and she had a huge career, so I apologize.
Oh, yeah, to that actor.
But
gosh.
I was thinking later, I thought, as packed as this cast is, why wasn't it like a Jenna Rollins or, a Jane Fonda or somebody more... Once again, I feel bad, but more notable
with bigger
in that
box office
character. But then I was thinking about it. That character had to kind of disappear because she didn't have a voice. Jason Robards ran that family. He was an alcoholic. He was domineering. The actress portrayed that character brilliantly in that she just had to put up with what her husband kind of dealt out.
That's why I thought it was great acting, because with a look and a sigh, she was able to communicate as much as some characters do with many lines of dialogue.
Yeah, she did her job, and she was a good actress. I just was shocked that it wasn't a more notable actress, but then I realized, you couldn't put Jenna Rollins in that character because she is such a strong character usually.
And so we talk about the title being Parenthood, and you mentioned there, you see that the character of, I believe it's Frank, was played by Jason Robards, the father, and Larry, the son played by Tom Hulse, are very similar, right? Mm-hmm. They're impulsive. They're perhaps alcoholics. They're not the most committed fathers. They leave their son, right? So at the beginning of the film, we see the father left Gil in the company.
At the ball field.
At the ball field, you paint an usher. And then what happens later? Larry leaves cool with his dad. And we also see that Gil and Kevin are the same person.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're both neurotic.
Yeah.
They're both obsessed with these things and holding on way too tight and worried about what if. And there's a really funny scene in the alleyway when Steve Martin as Gil is furiously washing his hands because he's gotten garbage on them. Like, I don't know where he gets this obsessive compulsive.
Yeah.
It's really quite funny. And as a parent, right, I think you would see a lot of that. The things that annoy you about your children, half the time, there are things that you annoy you about yourself. Not always, but when you see that, it's especially poignant to see the kids that carry it forward. And that's kind of a through line, because then you see Diane Weist's character and her daughter, played by Martha Plimpton. They also do very similar things, right? So you see this kind of recurring theme in there of each generation kind of repeats the mistakes of the previous.
Right. Yeah, that scene that you were talking about when they're in the alleyway looking for his retainer, just before that, when Steve Martin is witnessing his son kind of having a little bit of a panic attack that he's lost his retainer, which Steve Martin isn't a dad in real life, so I don't know how he did this, but...
he became one much later in life, by the
that's
way. Not
right.
at the time of filming.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The pain on his face at realizing that the same anxiety that he feels, his son is feeling. And I think as a parent, you feel responsible that even if that's a genetic component, like if that's a brain chemistry thing and anxiety isn't a learned behavior, that you're just like, oh my God, they have it too. You know, you just feel so responsible, and the pain on his face. That, and then there was a moment with Diane Weist. There's a moment when Joaquin Phoenix wants to call his dad because he wants to go live with him. And Diane Weist knows that this is not going to go well. She knows that the dad has moved on. He's created a new family. He has no interest in participating with her two children with him. And so she gives him the phone number and he goes to call, and the pain on her face as she knows what's being said on the other end, it is just palpable and
heartbreaking.
It's Jason Robard says it later that as a parent, I resonated with this, so I guess this is where I'm at. I think you have this misnomer that if you can get him to 18 alive, you've won. But then they turn 18.
And they turn on you.
And you realize, and Jason Robard says, you never get to cross the goal line. You never win the touchdown. You never get to score a goal. Because then at 18, now you've got to get them through, you know, like let's say college or their early adulthood. And then even then, maybe they're getting married. And so you want them to find somebody that it'll be a successful. And it never ends. Every milestone that your kids go through, you realize, like, will you worry about them? Is he going to get to keep his job? Are they going to get to keep their house? It's just endless.
So one of the things I like about this film is that it taps into an experience that I relate to. And for full disclosure, I mean, I was Kevin, right? When I was young, I had a lot of anxiety. Didn't play Little League because of kind of the heckling that went on. Kevin, I guess, pushed through it better than I did. But I think part of that is because at least writers, if not creatives, kind of identify with that, right? We can be a neurotic bunch. And that's part of what I think allows this film to tap into that. But I would think it's a fairly universal experience of parenting, even if you're not a naturally neurotic person, to have those concerns, like you said, all throughout their life. And that's what makes the storyline, in my opinion, with Larry so incredibly heartbreaking. And there's this great scene at the end of the film where Jason Robards, who's a fantastic actor in this film, really brings his A game. He tells his son how he's going to get him out of the trouble. And he lays out this very reasonable plan. And Larry says, okay, Dad, great idea. And then he pauses a beat for the audience to get their hopes up. And then he says, well, here's a wrinkle. Let's try this one other thing first. And the look silently, no dialogue, close up on Jason Robards, the look on his face as he realizes that his son will never change, right? Is again heartbreaking as a parent when you have to give up. Like this thing that I had, this vision, the hope, the dream, and it's not going to be. And then just to kind of, I guess, push it in your face a little bit more at the end of the film. Also, very heartbreaking is when Cool goes to him and asks, what's happening? And I'll get teary. Is my dad coming back?
Mm-hmm.
No.
And he says, no. He doesn't even lie to him. He's just like, nope, he's not coming back.
Well, that's probably the right thing to do in that case.
No, I agree, but he just...
Hard for the kid to hear that. Now
It's ironic because so far up, we're 17 minutes into this podcast and we have been talking about all the pain and everything of this film, but this film is so funny. I mean,
it's got some really great lines.
The way that they deliver this and everything that goes on.
So Ganz and Mandel write a lot of funny films.
Yeah.
They're great guys, and there's some really good gags in there. And so there's some basic stuff, like when they're in the van right after the game and they talk about something and Steve Martin says, well, that was money well spent, right? The kind of snarky comments that you would expect. But then there's some very funny twists on it. And so one of the things that I responded to the first time I saw this film, and people that I know that are not movie people will quote, is that Todd.
Oh,
right.
We can't meet somebody or talk to anybody who is named Todd without calling him that Todd.
Yes. And we apologize, Todd.
All the Todds that we know. We're sorry.
But there's also a great, hilarious gag that I thought had a punchline from Steve Martin, but when we watched it, he just laughs. So they lose power. He goes for a flashlight. His sister tells him it's in the top drawer of her nightstand. He grabs a cylindrical battery-operated device that he thinks is the flashlight, turns it on, there's a buzzing sound, the lights come back on, and we see it is not a flashlight. And he just laughs, which is great. Because that's what you would do if you discovered your sister's personal massager. So that was hilarious.
Such a memorable scene.
It really is. Again, I think most people who've seen the film remember that. But then you've got Keanu Reeves, who at this point in his career is basically known for playing a stoner, right? Between that Todd and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And he's got this delivery that makes him sound kind of a little bit, spaced out, baked, dumb. But he's got this great line, and I love that. That is one messed up little dude. And so in retrospect, I can't imagine anyone else playing that role.
Yeah.
And he's got this earnestness that reminds you of people at that age, a teenager, and it makes it funny. And I think Diane Weist's character has this kind of world weariness. And when she finds the photos that her daughter took with that Todd.
Right.
The line I love is, woo, that one's going in my wallet.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of really funny lines there. So the film is very, very funny. And I kind of categorize it as uses all of the lane, right?
Yes,
There's ups and there's downs, there's highs, there's low. It really goes all over the place.
Yes. The photo scene was inspired. That really happened to Brian Grazer. And I'm just trying to figure out, was he the parent or was he the kid?
Oh, that's awesome. I thought he was the parent, but maybe
he would have to be the parent, I guess, just timing, right? Because when he was a kid, they probably didn't have the photo mat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so
I love that.
Today's day and age with, iPhone apps and privacy and consent and all these things, it maybe doesn't play as well to the younger crowd, but there was a time when you would go drop off photos, possibly of a compromising nature, with just a name. And so the gag here is that because they're in the same family, they have the same family name, and the guy at the photo mat gives them the wrong one. There's also a gag in there about VCRs, which again, kids at this era wouldn't maybe understand. So
when you pull up your kids'
browser
internet,
history.
your browser history is how you find that out.
So it's from an era, right?
It is.
Certainly the shoulder pads and those sweaters tell us that it's in the 80s.
I still think so many of the gags, though, even work. I mean, the infamous vomit scene, which was inspired on a flight Ron gave Bryce Dallas Howard, who was like 2.5, 4 years old, I can't remember, some vegetarian sushi, and she promptly threw up on him, and it was a 17-hour flight, and he didn't have a change of clothes.
Well,
so
the lesson to be learned from that is don't give anyone vegetarian sushi.
Right.
But
and then I love the indestructible piñata at Kevin's party.
Sure.
How many times have you had a piñata and you give it to the kid, and it takes an adult to finally just bash on it before you ever get it open?
Well, this kind of veers a little bit into can't make this today, because I don't know if children today are allowed to have piñatas because it's such a bad idea. So if you're not familiar with it, the premise is you blindfold a kid and give him a whacking stick near the other kids who crowd around.
You bring all the other kids
because
close.
Candy's about to shower out. So they're crowding close. And then some, I don't want to say moron, some well-meaning parent pulls a rope to raise and lower the piñata so that most of the time the kid who's blindfolded and swinging the stick as hard as he can misses the piñata. Now, I want to bring this back to who's standing nearby? the other children at the party. This does not seem like a brilliant idea. But that
I
shows...
remember we had a very peaceful piñata at one of Brennan's. I think they've modified piñatas now. Each child pulled a string, and one of the strings released the bottom.
That's
Do you
certainly
remember that?
safer.
That was a peaceful piñata.
Peaceful, yeah. Every kid's a winner. Participation trophy, I guess. But...
No, only one string worked.
I guess. But I think that works even if you hadn't been to a piñata party as a kid. That works just to see the frustration that he goes through.
Yeah.
And then the thing with Cowboy Dan. And so there's a stripper involved, which is funny, right? So the film is actually very funny as well as very poignant. So I don't want it to come across as really down, because I like the film and I tend not to like depressing, boring, sad films.
But I think they hit it so perfectly. And isn't that Parenthood, the highs and lows, right? The final scene, this air flight I was talking about, or this airplane ride that Ron Howard was on, when he got to the end, he was trying to collect everything off of here he's been puked on, and he's trying to collect all of the luggage and everything. And he said it was just ultimate chaos. And he just had to start laughing, much like Steve Martin does.
Good response.
Yeah, at the end during the play and the chaos of the play, that there are times in your life when it gets so crazy and it's so over the top that is your response, which seems like an inappropriate response. But at the time, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. It's just hilarious.
Maybe this is why I'm weird, but I actually think it's the perfect response. Just laugh.
Right. What did you appreciate about the cinematography of this film?
There's a couple of shots that I think are noteworthy. One is there is a shot of Marilyn, which I believe is the mother, Frank's wife, and Grandma, played by Helen Shaw, slowly recoiling at Larry's story. And it's just a kind of a classic two-shot, but it just works really well in the middle of kind of all of this, just that, there's an American Gothic feel to it for me. And just the two of them slow recoil as he tells the story. But I did want to mention one of the things I've talked about in the past is things can work better off-screen than on-screen. And so there's a gag where a kid, Bobby or something, gets hit in the face by a ground ball, and it happens off-screen. And so obviously from a production standpoint, that's a lot easier to do than to find some parent who wants their kid to get hit in the face by a baseball 20 times to get the right take.
Right.
But it also works for the viewer because the viewer imagines it much worse than you could actually do to an actor.
Right. Well, in the costume department, I noticed one of our pause counts went for me because in about the first 10 minutes, we've got two of our, maybe one leading male and one supporting, in underwear.
Yes.
So, Steve Martin was in underwear in like the first 5 minutes. And then
Right.
Keanu Reeves, a very young Keanu Reeves, is in underwear.
And let's be clear, a lot of times in movies, they're actually wearing two pairs of underpants. They put on a tight pair underneath, often flesh colored, and then they put on a pair of boxer shorts over it. Not in this case at all.
No.
Very thin, tighty whities, although technically Steve's were gray.
We're gray, yeah.
But the classic jockey underpants, very tight, very clingy. There's not a lot left to the imagination.
I know. I was rather surprised.
Yeah. Well, the ladies maybe
Yeah, a
enjoy
little
that.
something for the ladies.
Oh, well, and gents. Sorry, I don't mean to be...
That's true. And then Martha Plimpton's hair from the very beginning, it's quite obvious that it was a wig. And I thought it was funny about halfway through, Ron Howard got sick of looking at it. And that's why he added the scene where they shave their heads so that she could just stop wearing the wig. It probably saved time in production as well.
Well, at least for hair and makeup for her.
Yeah.
But I think it worked with the characters, especially Keanu's
totally.
character.
Totally.
Also in the category of the costumes, I noted something that I thought was a little bit off. Just bump me. Sorry, filmmakers. At the beginning of the film, there's a St. Louis Cardinals game. The film is nominally set in and around St. Louis, even though I noticed Florida plates. Apparently it was filmed in Florida, but set in St. Louis. Yet when Gil is coaching his son's ball game, he has just a black, almost like umpire's ball cap on. And I thought, no, this guy would have a Cardinals hat.
Yeah, he totally would have.
My friend Tom, hi Tom, has a Cardinals hat. So this guy.
Yeah, and those Cardinals are loyal people.
Oh, yeah, Cards fans are pretty loyal.
How about a driving review?
Okay, so there's a Plymouth Voyager that features prominently as their minivan, and that is basically a Dodge Caravan that's been rebranded. So they get points, one of ours. There's the convertible Ford that Jason Robards has, which is a gorgeously restored car, and it figures very, very prominently in the plot of the film. I will mention that nice verisimilitude at the drag race when Keanu's Todd is racing, Gary, Joaquin Phoenix, is wearing a trucker cap from Imus the Ignition. So nice attention to detail from the filmmakers. For Adam Carolla, who hates that they got the goalposts wrong in Ghost Rider, this is a very nice attention to detail. Somebody on set said, okay, we're going to get him a good ball cap. But I have to say, the driving review is very poor. Steve Martin crashes his minivan. Now, he has an excuse.
Was it really his fault?
Pull over the side of the road. Safety first there, Gil. If you cannot operate your vehicle in that kind of circumstance, and I'm not saying you should, pull over to the side of the road.
No, we are not advocating for that type of behavior in a motor vehicle.
In a moving motor vehicle.
In a moving motor vehicle. Very.
Yeah.
Good point. Alrighty. We will go to the numbers. This movie had a budget of $20 million, and it did quite well. Domestically made $100 million, although in its first run, it made just under $100 million. So a few years later, they re-released it so that it could go over and make $100 million. I thought that was interesting from a studio perspective that they would go to all that trouble.
I think you go to that trouble when Ron Howard's involved and not when I'm involved.
Yes, this is an Imagine Entertainment Universal Pictures movie, and worldwide it made $126. So I would say successful. They quintupled their initial investment.
Yeah, no Big Fat Greek Wedding, but getting close.
Yeah, it was really good. So it's rated PG-13. It's, like Mike said, it's a little over 2 hours. I didn't really feel it, though. I guess.
I felt that it was over the 90-minute mark. It didn't feel long necessarily, but at one point I did realize, we've been going for a while. It doesn't feel long, but it is a little bit longer film.
And we really only have the one pause count. You paused to ask where it was set because you did spot that Florida plate, and it was in fact, I don't believe it was supposed to be set in Florida, but they filmed it in and around Orlando at a bunch of different places.
And that's why we had Howie, probably, because he was just nearby extra. He grew up in that area, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Good call. It scored a 7 on IMDb, but Rotten Tomatoes has it at 91, which I would agree.
That's
I think
fair.
this is an A movie. I mean, definitely I would give it a 9. I enjoyed it a lot. And I mean, it was funny because as we were watching it, I was quoting lines and I said, I'm sorry, I'll stop.
Yeah, I do think that she could quote the entire film start to finish. Now, I'm going to say nice tie-in here because Keanu Reeves was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and there was a point in time when my buddy Joe and I could have quoted all the dialogue from Bill and Ted's start to finish completely accurately.
Yeah. I guess we're big Keanu fans all the way. I've never seen The Matrix.
You've never seen The Matrix?
I know, I've never seen The Matrix. That's tough for a film person to say.
It is. I would love to watch that again, but also we have another Keanu connection through our good friend Dustin.
Oh, yeah.
So, boy, we're really orbiting the Keanu Reeves.
I know.
Yeah.
You're right.
Maybe he'll work with us one day. Who knows?
Who knows? That'll be fun. All right, everybody, that'll do it for this episode of the Dodge Movie Podcast, talking about Parenthood. Please rate and review us on your podcast listening apps. Not only does it help us in our ratings when we get those reviews, but it helps other people find our podcast, and we really appreciate it. Tell a friend about it if you know a movie watching friend that would enjoy the podcast. Hit us up on any of our socials. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and tell us what you're watching. Tell us what we should watch and tell us what you think of the podcast. And don't ever forget,
Dodgers never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christi and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.